So, good morning and welcome to today's webinar presentation by Cain, Redefining the Role of Government Agencies in Community Transition, the Latrobe Valley Authority, a case study. My name is John Wiseman and I'll be your moderator for this event. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the unceded lands from which we are joining this webinar. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and the elders of other communities who may be joining the webinar today. This webinar is hosted by the Energy Transition Hub, the Climate and Energy College, and the Melbourne Sustainable Society Institute at the University of Melbourne. The webinar is being recorded and the video will be available with the slides in the next few days. We'll invite you to ask questions. There'll be about 20 minutes for questions after the presentation. If you can do that in the usual way by clicking on the chat and typing your questions. And we'd also ask you to click the raise your hand button so we can identify you easily to invite you to ask your question. Now, I'm really delighted to introduce Cain. Cain is the Chief Executive Officer of the Latrobe Valley Authority. And as she will explain, the authority was established by the Victorian Government in response to the closure of the Hazelwood Power Station to help manage and support the Latrobe Valley's region's transition. Karen's been a resident of the Latrobe Valley for over 25 years and has significant experience working across government, leading strategic innovation and developing and implementing policy in Gippsland. Karen will talk for about 30 or 40 minutes and then, as I said, there'll be time for questions. Karen, over to you.
Thank you very much, John. And hello to everybody in the audience this morning. It's a real pleasure to be joining you. And like John, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we're all meeting today and pay our respects to elders past and present. So as I say, a real pleasure to be joining you today. I will be talking with you about the role of the Latrobe Valley Authority. And I have a number of slides that I will be working through with you this morning. And as John mentioned, very happy to answer any questions towards the end of the presentation. So I might just begin with explaining the establishment of the Latrobe Valley Authority. I've been in the role now for almost 4 years and really would like to give you a bit of background on the authority and its establishment. So as John mentioned, the authority was established in 2016 in response to the closure of the Hazelwood mine and was set up by the Department of Premier and Cabinet in the state of Victoria. One of the really important establishment conditions for the authority was that for people who are not aware, there has been over many years much work undertaken in the Latrobe Valley for a whole range of reasons by the government to support this community. And so one of the exciting opportunities with the establishment of the authority from the government's perspective was they were very keen for us to do things differently as a government agency. And having been in the public service for all of my career, that was a pretty exciting opportunity. So what does that actually mean? It means that we had the resources, we had the authority, we had the ability to build skills in a local team to take work in a very different way than maybe a government agency had done before. And why was that important? Because this event, this closure of a mine, a significant mine in this community, required a very different approach than what had happened in the past. So I might just move on to the slides now. Why is this photo here? It's a photo of the Latrobe Valley, just a physical photo for you to see. It's a very beautiful place. and it's got a community that is very proud of where it lives. And you can see the Mount Borboya in the background there, but it is a valley and it is a very beautiful place. And part of our job is to bring people together to celebrate the pride in this community, but also to build on the assets that we have here. And when I say we, this is my community, and the team that we work with are generally all from the Latrobe Valley or Gippsland. And so our commitment to this work is not only from a government perspective, but is personal as well. So just for those people in the audience who don't know where we are, I've just got a map here just showing you where in the state of Victoria the region of Gippsland is. As you can see, where Melbourne is located. Latrobe Valley is about 2 hours southeast, sort of southwest east of Melbourne. And you can see just some stats there about the region itself. So the Latrobe Valley is about 272,000 people and really covers 3 main towns. We work across the definition of Latrobe Valley is 3 local government areas. So that's Baw Shire, Latrobe City and Wellington Shire. And even that definition in the early days was very interesting because there was a bit of pushback from the Latrobe City community that sees the Latrobe Valley being about the place where 3 coal mines are, and that they define that as their community. So even locally in defining how we view ourselves and where the boundaries are has been an interesting challenge. But I think over the time that we've been working, we've been able to shift that view and that perception, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. You can see just some indication of the major industries here, but probably for this story today, the reliance on a single resource for an economy for a long period of time is one of the challenges that not only this community faces, but probably nationally and internationally as well, in terms of an economy based on natural resources, but an opportunity as well, I think. So let's just have a look at a bit about the past. So for those people who are not aware, so significant brown coal reserves here in the valley. And as you see, a long history of coal mining in this community. And with that comes generations of people, families who've been involved in this industry. And as I've mentioned, a real sense of pride that this community has contributed to the prosperity of the state through energy production and also energy into other states in the country. And probably the big shift occurred, not probably, absolutely the big shift occurred after the privatisation of the state's power network in the mid-90s. That had a significant impact here in this community in terms of employment conditions, social conditions, and a decline in the economy and social fabric of the community that probably has never really been recovered from. So one of the challenges for this work with the closure of Hazelwood is that we're still dealing with the implications of that privatisation decision. And dealing with a very different workforce. And so we've got both full-time permanent workers working at the 3 mines that currently still exist, which is Yallourn, Loy Yang B and Loy Yang A, but there's also a significant contractor workforce as well, and that has brought its own challenges. However, as mentioned here, we're already starting to think about the next closure, which is likely to be the Yallourn power station. And depending on the circumstances, that could be sooner rather than later, but really that will be dependent on a number of factors. but it's real and it's on the horizon. So it's work that we're already starting to think about and undertake as the next stage of change. So as I mentioned, Angie made the announcement of the closure, and that was announced in November 2016. The closure occurred on March 2017, not 201, sorry about that. And you know, it was a very interesting time because right up until the day of closure, there were still people in the community believing that somebody would stop this from happening. We had workers still believing that they would have a job. So what happens when we have announcements like this, it really doesn't matter which industry or which community. We really run through a grieving process from a community's perspective. So to begin with, there's disbelief, and followed from that is anger. And then eventually we get to acceptance and people starting to think about the future. So understanding community sentiment was really, really important for us. And really the really early work was to really understand the implications of this decision. We had 4 months to set up and get organised. And as I mentioned before, we're a team of local people. So the setting up of the authority was really based on getting the right skills match together very quickly, and setting up a base in Morwell. So we work out of an office when we are working in an office right in the heart of Morwell. And again, very important for our community for that to be the case. But again, you know, the reality of this was, from a community's perspective, well, here we go, we're going to set up another government agency. And so part of our challenge was to build trust very, very quickly. The fact that we were local people, and I think that was a very good design for the authority, it was really important. And so the team was made up of a range of people with different skills and experiences, not all from the public service. So we had people who were from the public service with experience in state government, from environment, education, which is where I came from economics perspective. But we also had staff join us with skills in case management and dealing with individual people, and a range of other people who came with quite different levels of expertise. And we grew that team over time because as we learnt about the work that needed to be done, we needed to build a skilled and I suppose a team of people who could respond to what was developing in terms of need. And that's been another really important design of our work, is knowing what we need to be prepared for in terms of the need in the community. But immediate loss of jobs and dealing with that became the urgent work. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we undertook that work. So just a little bit more for you about how we saw ourselves. And I won't forget someone coming to me fairly early on in the piece saying, "Where's your plan for the future, Karen? What is the authority planning to do?" And our response to that at the time was, well, we actually need to understand what needs to be done first, and that has to be done in partnership with community. And when we talk about community, we talk about all aspects of community here, and that, I think, is the other really important design of this work, is that we are designed to think about all aspects of community, not just one sector. So immediately our work was to support workers, businesses and community in the very, very first stages of response. But the more we have learned over the last 3.5 years, the more we understand that whilst response is critical, absolutely critical to supporting people who are hurting, who are, worried, who are directly impacted, we also have to look to the long term, because this is about setting up the conditions in our community for long-term change and building on the assets that we do have. So those stages of response, recovery and long-term strategic work have played alongside each other over those last 3.5 years, and I'll talk a little bit more about how that's played out as well. So again, part of the design of the authority, really important messaging here. And one of the things I want to say today is these are not just words on a page. So one of our really important principles as an authority is about action and is about real work on the ground. We work daily, we work closely with many people in our community, and we see that as a real partnership and a really respectful, understanding partnership. So those ideas about locally owned ideas, about genuine partnership and action orientated and outwards focus and coordinated effort are the core principles that we embrace and concentrate on in everything that we do. And I think one of the really important decisions we made right from the start in terms of where we set ourselves up was that we have an open door policy. So anybody could walk through the front door and ask to speak to somebody about something that mattered to them. And that was really important. And we had people coming in every day wanting to talk about what mattered to them. So listening, being respectful, understanding, but building on all of that knowledge that came through that door, either through a physical engagement or a telephone call, or going out and talking to people, really starts to bring a real understanding of the things that people care about. And in the early days, they were caring about what's happening to them personally. So one of the things we did was to put a worker transition service in place, and that was really important at the beginning, as you can imagine. But it wasn't a service run by the LVA directly, although we had a role in facilitating that. The hard yards was bringing the organisations together that could actually provide the support in a very coordinated way. So when we talk about a coordinated effort there, that's a really good example. So we worked with, we negotiated, we reached out to the adult education providers, to the Skills and Jobs Centre in TAFE Gippsland, to the Trades and Labour Council in Gippsland, to the employment agencies in Gippsland, and we formed a partnership. And the partnership's purpose was to support workers navigate through this very difficult time. We had a team of very, very skilled case managers who were the part of the team that workers could go to, and workers had a choice about who they went to see and get support from. And that's really important, because we know people will go to an organisation or an agency that they trust. And so the Trades and Labour Council became a really important organisation for us to work with, because their members felt comfortable in that place. They understood their work. They understood the conditions that their members were in. But we worked with Trades and Labour Council by supporting them with funds to help set up, additional training programs and the ability to get certificates to move into other occupations. So over that time, that partnership with these organisations has remained really strong. And we've really succeeded in providing very personalised support for workers. Not only workers though, their families as well. So a worker exists in a family in most cases, and this impacts a whole family. So we were providing support for family members, whether it was mental health support, whether it was financial support. And again, this idea about action orientated and meeting local needs. So it is really about listening to what people need and adjusting and being flexible to provide those services. And we didn't provide them, but we helped source those services. So again, a different way for a government agency to act, and having the flexibility to be able to do that was really significant in partnership with many other agencies and people. So as I mentioned, we have over this time been evolving our approach, and we've been learning as an organisation and learning with our community. So that point about what matters to people continues to be a really significant approach. And we have built, I think, a very skilled team in understanding the importance of that and how to do that well. But also, you know, how to make decisions on what we act on, and act on with other people and other partners. So testing our knowledge and identifying priorities and customized responses has been critical. So really testing whether or not something will work, whether it's needed, whether that's going to meet the requirement, and go back and rethink that if that's not the case. And we've done that on numbers of occasions. So as we've moved from that immediate response to, we identified gaps in the work that was happening in systems, in practices, in organisations. The more we learnt, the more we were able to identify that there were gaps in work that needed to be done. So it is about those gaps, but it also is about the opportunities that presented. So it is about, you know, this idea of system-wide change. So how do you think about creating the conditions where we may have to adapt more into the future, where skills are not stagnant, where skills are not just about the technical skills. And that's one of the things we did learn very, very quickly on. A very, very skilled, technically skilled workforce. But as we learnt from individual people, and some themes started to emerge from workers about what other skills were required for either a change in occupation or even staying in the mining industry, moving from one mine to the other, is also you know, not necessarily straightforward. So we started to have a look at, well, what other skills do workers need to think about their future career, and having a career plan, which many workers had not had before because they hadn't needed to. So we've been doing some work on, you know, the soft skills, and particularly once we started to really talk with industry about not only the mining industry, but other growth sectors in our community, what sort of skills are you looking for? So this balance between technical skills and skills like communication or problem solving or teamwork have really come to the fore. And we're doing some work on that at the moment, again with the University of Melbourne, on some micro-credentialing across industry and through our training organisations, to see if we can build those skills quickly to enable people to continue to find work. But those conditions for collaboration and learning and in testing ideas and self-determination is part of the really important work we're doing right now. One of the things we've learnt through, which I'll talk about a little bit later, is about the context that this region is in, not just in Latrobe Valley, but understanding the DNA of a region, and where it sits within a state, and where it sits nationally and internationally, is really important to understand. And so I'll talk a little bit further about that. So just just a bit of an overview for you, which I didn't mention at the start. Along with the establishment of Latrobe Valley Authority was a $266 million support package, quite a significant investment in the community. And you can see some of the figures there. I'm not going to go through all of these individually, but I just wanted to give you a flavour of the range of work that we were required to undertake. Some of that was set for us, and some of that we have developed. But you can see that in thinking about a whole community and how you respond in a whole community, there are many elements of stimulation there for the economy, connecting communities, building on social requirements. You can see there through the Good Shepherd loans, you know, up until Good Shepherd was established here for people to get, particularly people in you know, difficulty financially, were not dealing with really ethical financial organisations in our community. So having a really ethical organisation who could provide ethical loans to members of the community was really important, and that's really been taken up so well, and just shows us how important things like that are in a community for its for support. There were quite a number of jobs and economic stimulus packages, everything from the economic growth zone, you'll see there. So almost 1,300 businesses who receive reimbursements of state fees, whether it's local government or state government fees. It can be stamp duty, it can be costs for registering of vehicles. There's a whole range of things there. So they get reimbursement if they can provide evidence that that has cost them. And that's an open system, so any business can apply for those funds. There was a back to work scheme, which was fantastic. So businesses who were willing to put on a staff member were provided with some funding to support that, and additional funds if they were willing to provide them with extra training. And you can see the job numbers that have come out of that. We also had Regional Development Victoria, who are doing some work. They had on a $10 million fund on encouraging businesses to expand, and in expanding put an additional staff, and that was an infrastructure fund. So you can see that stimulation into the economy to grow jobs, support businesses to continue to grow. The supply chain into Hazelwood were provided with support both in planning and financially to seek further different contracts and different to work elsewhere. There was a worker transfer scheme through the other power stations, and that was an ATO partnership with unions and the other mines to look at transferring workers out of Hazelwood into the other mines. Ended up with 90 workers. The intention was for 150, but it didn't get to 150 for a range of reasons. So 90 workers did get the benefit of that transfer scheme. There was a focus on major sports infrastructure. So, you know, $85 million put into sports and associated activities and infrastructure. And people ask, why would you do that? Well, you can imagine the construction that's generated, and the construction industry is actually booming here. Supply chain that goes with that. And the other probably really important part of that is that one of the things we learned really early on when we spoke directly with the construction industry about what was stopping them from doing what they needed to do was local procurement. So again, this listening to what matters and asking the question was really important, because that led to us learning about some work had been done in Geelong on increasing local procurement, We engaged some experts in the field that had already been working in Geelong. They are now working and have been for some time with us now on actually how we get local businesses to get contracts, local supply here, so that the spend and the jobs are directly in this community, and reducing the number of outside contracts and outside suppliers coming into the community. So that Gippsland Grow came out of that, and in addition to that, you'll see over 1,000 businesses now as part of that work who are signed up to Gippsland Business Connect, which is an online connection for businesses to find other businesses to get supplies from, or to, you know, form consortia on contracts. And that hadn't been in place and hadn't been organised at all. So we've got a number of signatories now for businesses across Gippsland who are committed to local procurement. And that has led to a lot of contracts in the major infrastructure, including the rail upgrades here, being local. We've worked with the industry groups to really understand how we can support local businesses to get the most out of tenders and contracts locally. It's been a really important part of our work. I think I might leave, there's some other components of that work there, and probably the access to new industries is the other one I might just mention. So, and the community support, funding support up the top there. So I might go to the $20 million for community funding support. So again, this is a facility, but it's also a capacity building program that's been amazing in reaching out to small communities about what they need and supporting them to upgrade local facilities for really strong social connection and building participation. It's done a couple of things. It's reconnected people. It's provided really strong well-being and mental health and social networking outcomes, pretty critical, but it's also increased participation in local community activities, and it's boosted the economy through local tradies and local people being involved in those infrastructure. The other thing it's done though, majority of the infrastructure builds have embraced renewable energy as part of a way of saving money, because these are volunteer groups with limited funds. But what that's done is really shift the thinking about renewable energy as something that's you know, great for our community. So again, all of these things start to play out in the way people view their future. So I might move on. So just some employment data, and you know, this is pre-COVID, but I thought it was really important to show you with all of that activity what you can do over a short period of time, relatively short period of time. And we've been really, really pleased with these outcomes. So this is pre-COVID. I won't go into what's happened since then, but you can imagine these figures no longer what they are, but pretty impressive figures. And this has been really important to have some really strong data to demonstrate to community and to you know, state government and to broader communities that you can actually really make a difference here. And it's not, you know, not necessarily going to be the devastation that people were predicting, and people really were predicting devastation here. People were doing, you know, forecasting and telling a very, very sorry story. That doesn't help a community, actually. It actually, you know, continues a victim mentality and a dependency mentality, which has been in place for a long time. And so it's really this idea of self-determination and getting people to see that the future's in their hands if we work in partnership has been really important. So all of those things that were put in place have contributed to these figures. And that's a very good story. And we've been measuring sentiment over this time, and the sentiment has absolutely shifted. I don't know, I won't have time to go in about how we've done that, but we've done it in a variety of ways. So I just wanted to get on to the future work. So beyond response and early recovery work, which you've just seen a bit of a description of, what we've learned is that there are a number of themes that have come out as we've learned over the period of time. One of the really important aspects of our work is about multi-level governance, and I don't have time to go into talk about the detail of what we mean by that. But we've worked really hard at collaboration and bringing organisations together, and this idea of mutual benefit, and it not being about individuals or individual organisations' own benefit, but the benefit for community, and taking a much broader picture. Now, whilst we all know that individual businesses, individual organisations absolutely have a need to promote and grow their own work, we are working hard at establishing this broader concept of mutual benefit. And I think the description of what we've been able to do with businesses is a really good example of that. So if people collaborate and work together, everybody benefits, and we grow a community that continues to stay strong and has a really strong future. So one of the tricky parts here has been about governance, and this is not just about this community. So rural communities can be quite disconnected, and part of that is about history. Part of that is about how they were established, and isolation, particularly in further communities that are further away from major centres. So this idea of collaboration has been hard work, and it's about demonstrating the benefit, not just saying there is benefit, but demonstrating that benefit in collaboration. And what we're right in the middle of at the moment is truly trying to understand how we can build on a whole range of people and places and organisations that are making decisions, and how we can bring that level of decision-making partnership together in a way that makes much more sense than where we're at the moment. So this is about networks, it's about going out into networks and community and building on the knowledge and skills that those networks have, but bringing that back and sharing that and getting common intent. So we've just got some work underway on that at the moment. The second idea is about identifying and advancing competitive regional strengths over time. So what's emerged out of all of our work is knowing where our strengths are. And every region, every state, every country has assets and strengths that we need to really build on. And obviously the energy industry is absolutely a strength. So how do we take all of that experience and knowledge and history and build on that for the future? And the third part of this is about knowledge and skills associated with those strengths. So, having a skilled workforce, having a skilled, knowledgeable community that understands how these things come together, and how we can integrate and make sure that this idea of integrated actions is really critical here. How we bring these four sectors together in a way that one is a partnership right from the beginning, but two makes sense completely about their interrelatedness and the importance of that. And I suppose the fourth section there is still about activation of spaces and place here from a community perspective, because the fabric of the community is really important. It's really important for all the reasons I mentioned earlier, but it's about livability. It's about a place being attractive to live in. It's about attracting workers either to come to an area or to stay, but it's all those social aspects of life that makes a community what it is, you know, beyond just going to work every day, or you know, it's really critical, and obviously that's playing out very much at the moment in terms of our current challenges. So they're the sorts of, those four areas of where we've ended up in the last 6 months to really think about how we continue to create the long-term conditions now for the future of this community, knowing that, you know, we still have to go back into recovery and response as things emerge, but we've got to have an eye to the future. So this next section is just building on our strengths, and the last bit I'm going to talk about is our work that we've undertaken in Smart Specialisation in Gippsland, and how critical this has been to thinking about that future work. So for those people who don't have any knowledge about Smart Specialisation, this is a very, very, very brief introduction, and there's much more to it than I can talk about today. But it really is about an approach to boosting growth and employment, but also beyond that, building the conditions in a community for innovation and collaboration. But at the heart of it, is really understanding where the assets are and how we can value add those and make those something that's quite special to this region. At the heart of it though, and one of the things that we've again learned, and this fits very well with our experience, is that right up front, it's about partnerships across sectors, so industry and businesses, community agencies, government, both state and local, education and research, coming together right at the beginning to work on identifying where those assets are, testing those, really bringing in some very strong evidence, reaching out into the community to understand where there are opportunities, where innovation is occurring, and really building on what is working really well here, but also really understanding we've got to look for expertise beyond the community to understand what really is an opportunity. And there's some, you know, really careful work that needs to occur there. In addition to that, though, is this idea of building institutional capability and a regional innovation system, because if we don't collaborate and innovate, we don't continue to grow, and we can't stand still. And we're not talking about innovation in the old thinking of innovation. We're talking about innovation in a whole range, whether it's systems or practices or you know, any particular change that's going to change the way an organisation or a work occurs can be called innovation if it's a change in practice that continues to improve. So the three basic ideas about smart specialisation are on the screen for you there, and that's probably what's driving us at the moment in terms of this framework. It's complex work, and I'll just move to the next slide so you can actually see where this has come from. Sorry, it's just taking a little time to come through. Okay, so when we started to look out for the long-term work and where we might think about where there might be some practice, because one of our other core principles was learning from others and not starting from scratch. We went to the Hunter Valley in New South Wales, who, with the closure of the steel industry and obviously other closures and transitions have been going on in the Hunter Valley for some time now. We sought some advice from the approaches that they were taking, and one of the really strong focuses was about what they were doing for their future, and they had taken up this idea of smart specialisation, learned about from the European Union. And we now over the last couple of years have really worked hard at understanding this work, but also building a relationship through RMIT and Melbourne University on connecting through to the Smart Specialisation platform that runs out of the European Union, and really understanding the practice. Now, one of the benefits of that is that this is a huge organisation, as you can imagine, with a huge research base, and we have learned a huge amount from the practice over time that the union has undertaken based on really contemporary regional development practices. And so one of the really, I think, interesting aspects of this work is that in order to get regional development funding through the European Union, if you are a union member, is that the approach is through smart specialisation. And it's a bottom-up, top-down approach, but it's absolutely about, from a bottom-up, local communities, and doesn't really matter whether it's a town or a sub-region or a city or a whole state, really doing some very, very careful work on identifying their assets and testing those before seeking funding to develop those and put those in place. So sort of that's the approach that we're taking here, and we've adapted this practice for Gippsland. We're very early days in, but it's really playing out very, very well, and I'll give you some examples of that. So we are now a registered region on the Smart Specialisation platform. And why does that matter? Because we get access to all of the research that goes on. We can join in on sessions through the Smart Specialisation platform, and I absolutely believe we need to learn from the very best and bring research and knowledge into a community to test what we're doing. So the things that really resonated with us was its place-based, so it's built on local assets and resources, so absolutely, that's what we wanted to do. This idea of open innovation, so this idea of shaping choices according to the circumstances here. The idea of continuous improvement, and I'll go back to that point about, you know, what does the state of Victoria need? It will be about growth and productivity. Absolutely, it's about continuous improvement. We've talked about collaboration, so absolutely for us that fitted very, very well, and about inclusivity. So really not the usual suspects here. This is about really diversity in terms of voices and people with ideas, and that's what innovation's about as well. Is how do you find those? How do you bring a whole range of people in to contribute to decision making and identifying where the opportunities are? And that last idea about competitive advantage, we actually need to get to that point. So very, very important. And you'll see in that diagram there, again, really critical is bringing those sectors together in a partnership from the beginning through to the end of this work. So one of the other really important components of this work was understanding the conditions for what we might call a disconnected region versus a connected region. And again, this is some research that's been done, and we've drawn on not only from research through the European Union, but other really important institutions like the OECD and other places that have done work on what it looks like to have a connected region. And you can see again reinforced what I've just talked about in terms of what needs to be in place for a connected region. So again, we're trying to really, really base our work on some very, very strong evidence about how to work and what conditions we need. So the other aspect of our work was last year putting out an innovation survey to businesses across the region, the first time that had happened, based on survey work again out of the EU. And we got a really good response to that survey And it just tells you, you know, in a snapshot, the current conditions, and then that helps you understand where the work needs to be. So, you know, 63% said they were undertaking innovation in some kind, active. 83% of those businesses that it was local. So, and only 6% said it was about patents or, you know, beyond this community. So whilst we've got businesses saying that they're involved in innovation activity, it's individual businesses in their own business, not necessarily connected beyond to another business in the area, but certainly not outside of this community. So there is an opportunity there, but there's also a challenge there in how we think about supporting innovation across businesses and industries in this community. So just before I finish up, through our smart specialisation work, we've undertaken some work across those 4 sectors to see where there may be opportunity for competitive advantage, regional innovation, building on, as I said, the assets that are already here. And you can't just stay at a very generalised level here. So where in particular in food and fibre or energy or the visitor economy or health and wellbeing, where are the assets, the particular assets of those sectors that we need to focus on, first understand and then focus on. And that's the work we've got underway at the moment. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a snapshot of where we're up to with energy, just one of those sectors today. And so the early work in trying to understand where the opportunities were was really going out with a context analysis and having a look at the energy sector, understanding the energy sector as it currently is, but seeing where there might be opportunities for some particular work that may be of competitive advantage here. And so through a whole range of processes, we ended up with 4 themes that came out for further testing. And you can see there that under community energy and geothermal and smart grids and bioenergy, there are a number of actions underway at the moment that are being undertaken through a whole lot of networks on the ground doing this work in partnership, built on that model that I've been talking about. So it's government, it's business, it's local communities, and it's training organisations and researchers that have formed part of this investigation and undertaking this work. And it's wonderful to see local towns leading some of this work and community groups right in there who are, you know, being the champions for this work in partnership with experts and people in their own community, but people beyond their own community. So, you know, we're drawing on expertise nationally and internationally now. You can see that Smart Grid Global Market Scan that's underway. So it really is, it's done things that we hoped for, but probably better than we anticipated. So I might just leave that there, and I'm very, very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Karen. That's great. We have, in fact, lots of questions, some really excellent questions, I think. We probably won't get through all of them, but we'll see how we go. Karen, is it all right if we perhaps go on for about 10 minutes beyond 12? Is that okay with you?
Yes, I think so. I think that's fine for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we won't get through them all, but can I begin with a question? Can I also ask people to introduce themselves when they ask their question and just where they're from? The first question is from Mark Wakeham. Mark, are you able to ask your question? Mark, you'll need to unmute, I think.
John, thanks very much. It's Mark Wakeham. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Mark.
correct.
I've just got various messages saying I'm muted or unmuted. Mark Wakeham from the ACTU. Thanks very much, Karen. It's really impressive body of work. I guess it shows what's possible when there is government commitment to investing in a region. And unlike all the other coal closures that we've had in Australia, we had a really serious investment in the establishment of the Latrobe Valley Authority from the state government and a smaller investment from the federal government. I'm just wondering whether you think that those resources, which I think totaled around $310 million in the case of Hazelwood, whether that is the sort of, whether that's an adequate amount of money. I know it's not all about money. There's a lot about process and what that leverages. But is that the sort of investment that we're likely to need as power stations the size of Hazelwood are closing? And therefore, is that the amount that we should be sort of factoring into future closure discussions?
I think that's a really good question. And you can see the impact of that investment here and the quick, I think relatively quick turnaround that we were able to get in a community that absolutely needed it. I think some of it will be context specific, Mark. And again, I think that investment was for this community the right investment. I'd really need to understand the context of other communities because they all have very different needs. So, we've had delegations here from Collie in Western Australia and from the Hunter Valley. And when you look at those two communities, very different needs. I think it really is dependent, but I think the point about an investment to understand a whole of community is probably the important part here, and all of those elements that are required. So it might be a variation on the amount, but it probably is some fairly common elements of that investment that's required.
Thank you. The next question is from David Ferrari. And David, you'll need to unmute.
Thank you, John. And thanks for that presentation, Karen. Very interesting.
That's fine, David. Hello.
Good to see you. Listen, I wondered about the role of state and federal governments going forward, and whether you think, with the Hazelwood announcement, the closure being a bit of a shock, and obviously a bit of a knee-jerk reaction from policymakers, I wonder whether that shock was a good wake-up call for policymakers at those higher levels of government in thinking about planning for future disruptions.
Yes, it is, and yes, it has been. And I think what it was really interesting because when we started to speak to people, after that announcement, and I spoke to many groups of people, Rotaries, Catholic Ladies Associations. Part of our job was to go out and talk to as many groups of people as possible. There was a lack of understanding about this decision, and I think that really makes us think about: do we really understand the environment that we're in terms of companies, overseas companies, or decisions being made by business about decisions like this, and whether or not your point about whether or not government understands those economic plays that are coming to fruition now. And again, obviously we're thinking about Yawn Power Station at the moment, which is highly likely to be the next one to close. So who's going to make that decision? It's a commercial enterprise. So what are the factors that are going to be in play to understand that decision, but also be well prepared for that? And I think we've learned a lot from the Hazelwood experience to understand that. And you're absolutely right. I believe that we do need to understand the realities of these situations, but what are going to be the triggers? And there might be a number of triggers. So being able to predict them is going to be very interesting, I think.
Thank you. Next question is from Simon Kerr.
Good morning, and thanks so much for a really enlightening sort of run through on all this. My question's around, I guess I'm thinking about the cultural shock that this is to a community that has historically built its identity around coal and energy, as well as other forms of resources. And that future now, it clearly is not the future they had imagined maybe 20 years ago. And I'm wondering where the community's at in this sort of cultural transition in terms of their grappling with identity. What does it mean to be in the Latrobe Valley? What's the sort of, how do you see that cultural evolution moving, and where's the community at?
Yep. Look, a really, really pertinent question. And I think there has been a shift. So as I mentioned in the presentation, certainly denial, anger, immediately. And again, I'll come back to the point about how much knowledge or understanding a community has about all of the conditions that lead to decisions like this, both at a local level, at a government level, but it is a business and international level in terms of everything from climate change through to commercial decisions and everything in between. But I think there's still a bit of there's still parts of the community who absolutely want to hang on to the past, who absolutely want to see coal as it's continuing to be the future. And there's work being done now to try and find other ways in which coal can be used commercially. You may or may not be aware that there's work currently going on, an agreement between the federal and state government to look at coal conversion into hydrogen and exporting of that. So that's still happening here, and that will play out. But probably the turning point for me is we had the national chief scientist down here probably well over 12 months ago, who did a presentation to about 200 people in an auditorium here about the future of energy internationally and nationally. And he painted a really good roadmap picture about what he's predicting is going to happen. And I think that was a really important point of understanding from a range of people in the community that coal can no longer be the future for energy production, and that technology and community and business are looking for a different future. So it will continue to take time. And again, one of the important parts of our work is to understand and take on all of the skills that exist here in this community around energy, and see what that asset can bring. And so as you've seen, there's a huge amount of work being undertaken now about renewable energy and where the opportunities are, and the assets that we've got here.
Thank you. The next question, and probably just one or two more. This one is from Lynette Smith.
Thanks, John, and thank you, Karen.
Hi, Lynette.
Hi. I was thinking that the rest of the state is going to need to be transitioning in some way, even if we're not directly, our economies, local economies are not directly reliant on coal in the way that the Latrobe Valley is. So my thought is that we need to learn from you, and I'm wondering how we can do that. So I'm wondering if what you have learnt as you've implemented in the Latrobe Valley, whether there are some plans to share that with other agencies around the state, other departments. It may not be you doing that actual work, but I just want to get a sense of how that can be made available to the rest of us, that knowledge and experience.
Thanks, Lynette. Look, I have to say we're pretty passionate about our work, and I think having the privilege and the opportunity to test the way a government agency can work differently has been, fantastic for a whole range of reasons. One, because, hopefully we've done the work that needed to be done, and, forgotten that we're a government agency basically, and just get on and do it. But I agree with you. I think there is a lot to be learnt about how public service operates in communities, and we're trying to influence very strongly some shift in the way public service, and in its truest sense, can do things differently and operate differently. So we're trying to influence that change, and we're trying to do that both internally through state government here, but also through our partners. I think if we really are committed to, you know, influencing change, then I think we've got to have a whole lot of people who champion that. Because I'm a public servant, I will work hard in the system and work on the system, but I think we need voices of other people to, you know, to champion this and advocate for it if we really want to get the change that you're talking about.
Agreed, thanks.
Thank you, Lynette. And our last question today will be from Ray Eisen. Ray.
Thank you, Karen. A great talk, a great exemplar. My question concerns the governance arrangements ongoing, and it's quite clear that you've built a community of praxis inside your organisation that understands how to do what you're doing. When you look to legacy issues beyond your own time there, how will you go about that legacy management, and what systemic changes will be necessary to conserve an agency like yours in the face of ministerial or party change at the state level?
Yes, Ray, that sort of occupies my mind quite a bit, as you can imagine. So we've got two things we need to do, and what I've described this morning, you know, we're right just at the beginning here for really, really long-term system and innovation change. That's long-term work. So we're working really hard at the moment to build that institutional capability through partnership and collaboration. So what I haven't had a chance to talk to you about today is we've got some frameworks that we've developed around what we call behaviour change work, which is about how you build that change in systems and attitudes and practices in organisations that see that collaboration has to be the name of the game here. You know, working really hard to get 6 local councils to agree to work on some of those opportunities that I've talked about. So we've actually got to change the fabric of the way organisations operate and individuals operate in a community, and see that by doing that, they are actually, you know, going to benefit their community, and not only benefit their community, it's critical that they do that, because there is no other way for the current environment that we're in, but it's just good practice anyway. So the legacy we're really, really conscious of, but it's slow work. It's slow work. It's you know, you're trying to influence ways of working. And again, I'll come back to the point that we've had the up until the privatisation, and even in some of the other industry sectors here, we've had a stable economy here. People have lived a reasonable life. Not everyone in our community, but you know, there hasn't been a need for change, and so people don't see a need for change. So this is the one opportunity for us to be able to have that legacy. And the question about, you know, changes of government and policy, we work really hard at trying to demonstrate that. Go back to the point that I think Lynette was making, that this is not just about Latrobe Valley. This is a way of working we should have everywhere. This is really contemporary regional development, I think in its very best. And we've worked hard to try and make sure that that's what we've learned about and what we're putting in place. Again, I'll come back to the point that we need people to advocate for this. On our own, we can't do that. So we need support.
Thank you. That sounds like an excellent place to conclude, and an excellent invitation for others to continue to support this work. Just before I thank Karen and everyone for joining, firstly, to remind you that yes, this has been recorded, and the recording and the slides will be available in the next few days from the Climate and Energy College and Energy Hub sites. I'd ask you or invite you to make sure you're registered with the Hub or the college or the Melbourne Sustainable Society Institute, or all three, to make sure that you get notified of future seminars. Having said that, I would really like to thank everyone for joining. There are lots of questions, and I might try and pass some of them on to Karen as well for future reference. And Karen, thank you so much for your time and for a great presentation. I look forward to seeing everyone at future seminars. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, John, and thanks for the opportunity. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.